3:17 in the morning, by my best guess. Outside it's maybe 4 degrees, maybe less. The concrete around me sweats with the cold, and the air has that metallic taste, like when snow is about to fall. But it never really does anymore. Not like it used to. The wind has been scraping along the broken street above the bunker door all night, and every now and then, it slips through the cracks and whistles down the stairwell, like it's trying to talk. This is Thomas Miller, somewhere under what used to be a small local station on the outskirts of Dresden, Germany, broadcasting on 103.9 FM if the dial still means anything to anyone. I'm running this off an old car battery hooked into the backup transmitter and a small inverter that hums like a dying bee. The battery's at maybe a quarter charge. The little green light on the box keeps flickering, and every time it dims, I feel my stomach tighten like it does when I hear scratching on the outer door. I don't know how many days it's been. I woke up not sure if it was still the same day or the next one. If you can hear this, if anybody can hear this, just know this much. Silence is not your friend. That's my first rule now. Never trust silence. The city has fallen. Roads are gone. You've got 5 minutes and 1 backpack. What do you take? Let me know in the comments below. It used to feel peaceful, silence. We chased it. People bought houses farther and farther from the city, just so they wouldn't hear traffic. I remember sitting in my old kitchen, complaining about the neighbor's motorbike, or the bus that stopped too close to our building, and all I wanted was some quiet. Now the quiet feels like someone holding their breath behind you in the dark. The moment everything really went down, the first thing I noticed wasn't the screaming or the sirens or the breaking glass. It was the way all the background noise died. No planes overhead, no distant hum of the highway. The constant buzz of notifications and messages just stopped. I stood there on my balcony, looking at the ring road in the distance, and all the cars had stopped in place like someone pressed pause on the world. A few were crooked, one wedged into the back of another, doors hanging open. Some horns were stuck, blaring until the batteries died. But under all that, there was this huge empty space where life used to be. That's what I hear now, every time the wind outside dies down. That same empty space pressing on my ears. And sitting down here, talking into a microphone that might be shouting into nothing, I keep thinking about that first quiet moment and how I knew, deep down, that this wasn't a glitch or a power cut. That was the sound of something ending. Back then, when phones still worked on and off, the maps were the first to lie. I remember pulling up the navigation app on my old phone, standing at my window, watching that frozen highway while the screen told me traffic was flowing fine. Green lines everywhere. Smooth travel ahead. There were official alerts too. The little banners popping up about temporary disruptions, planned curfews, localized riots. Nothing to worry about. Stay in your homes. It all sounded neat and under control, while reality outside the glass was cracked and wrong. I worked at this station part-time as a tech, and sometimes did late-night news filler. And one of the guys I shared shifts with, Marco, was the first to say it out loud. He leaned over the console one night, rubbing his eyes under the studio light, and said, "Thomas, these maps are bullshit. They're not real. They're caching old data or someone's forcing them." I laughed it off. I said the servers were probably overloaded. He just looked at me, tired and wired at the same time, and said, "When they keep telling you it's fine, that's when it's not fine." I didn't get it then. Now I wish I had listened to him sooner. I think the moment I truly realized the world was ending was on a Wednesday, or at least it felt like a Wednesday. I had gone out against the first curfew to bring my wife some medicine. Her name is Anna. I keep saying is like she's still here. Maybe she is somewhere. She had a fever from some stupid infection, and every pharmacy was closed. But I knew the bigger one near the tram depot had those metal shutters you could pry up a little if you knew where to kick. On the way there, I followed the main road, because that's what you do when everything in your head still believes rules matter. The traffic lights were stuck on red in all directions, changing to yellow, then back to red on a loop, blinking for nobody. Cars were jammed in both lanes, some with doors open and no one inside, others with people slumped behind the wheel like they'd fallen asleep at a rest stop. I walked past a bus that had driven up onto the sidewalk, its windshield cracked with a spiderweb pattern from the inside. There were smeared handprints on the glass, like someone had tried to claw their way out, and my brain just filed it under horrible accident because the alternative didn't fit yet. Then my signal died mid-call to my brother, and that empty silence came again, not just around me, but in my ear. That was when I started shaking. You don't think about digital noise until it's gone. The little vibrations, message tones, flimsy pop songs leaking out of someone's earbuds on the street. That day, everything cut off at once. The screen froze on my brother's name, Daniel calling, then went black. No restart, no emergency calls, just a cold piece of glass in my hand. The bus doors were hanging open now that I think about it, and there was a shoe lying in the gutter. Just one. I remember stepping around it, like that was the most important thing, not to touch that shoe. There was a man standing in the middle of the lane, staring down the road as if he expected a parade to come rolling through any second. When I walked past, I realized he was bleeding from his forearm, teeth marks deep and round and wrong, but my brain still tried to make it a dog bite. He mumbled something about barricades near the stadium, about people breaking through, about them not staying down when they should. I kept walking, because the air already felt strange and sticky, and I didn't want to hear him say the word we were all avoiding. I just wanted to get those pills and get back to Anna. Later, when everything got worse, I would think back to my neighbor, Frau Keller, and realize she'd seen it coming before I did. She lived 2 floors below us and always complained about the news channels, said they never showed the real problems, only argued about numbers. One evening, a day or 2 before that frozen highway moment, she cornered me in the stairwell, holding a bag of potatoes and a stack of old newspapers. She told me she'd watched a clip some relative sent her from the hospital in Italy or Spain, I don't remember, somewhere with bright white halls and people lying on mattresses on the floor. She said it wasn't just overcrowding, it was something else, something in their eyes when they stared at the camera, like they weren't really seeing it. She tapped her temple and said, "When this kind of thing comes, Thomas, it moves faster than the people in charge can admit. By the time you hear it's in the news, it's already outside your door." I smiled awkwardly, said the government knew what it was doing, and went upstairs to microwave dinner and ignore the creeping feeling behind my ribs. Later, when the infection jumped every border like they weren't even there, her words would repeat in my head every time I heard someone pounding on a locked door. Official channels became dangerous before the streets did. They kept telling us to stay on the routes, follow the signs, trust the system. The big green arrows on the overhead displays pointed everyone toward the same exits, the same tunnels, the same supposedly safe zones. But the reality was that any place someone in a suit called secure turned into a trap by the time you got there. This frequency used to carry traffic updates and late-night indie tracks. I remember the first time I broke protocol, Power was flickering in the building. The internet had already gone for good, and we were told to read from prepared sheets printed that morning by someone higher up the chain. They had all the right words: temporary disturbances, coordinated response, shelter in place. During a lull, when the main line from the Capitol cut out mid-speech, I had an open mic and 2 minutes of dead air staring at me. I had been watching the feeds from the security cameras around the city before they went dark. I'd seen crowds packed on the main ring waiting for buses that never came, heard distant screams over muted footage near the central station. So when I leaned into the mic that night, I didn't read the sheet. I said, "If you're hearing this and you're still trying to reach the big evacuation routes, turn around. Take back streets, residential roads. Avoid highways. Avoid the main station. The big places marked as safe are already overflowing. Find small spaces. Think small." It felt like treason. Maybe it was. But a few hours later, I got a call from a man who said he'd listened, taken a side route, and seen what I was talking about. Buses overrun, police barricades swarmed, the so-called safe zone choked with screaming. That was the last call I ever took on the station phone line. After that, the network went dark and never came back. There's one I didn't save, and that one keeps me awake. It's the reason I talk like this now, as if someone is actually there, because I still owe him an answer I never gave. He called in the following night, I think, or maybe it was later. Time gets slippery. His voice was young, maybe early 20s, trying very hard not to shake. He said he was stuck with his little sister in a car near the river, trying to decide if he should follow the arrows toward the stadium or the smaller road on his right that looked empty and dark. The navigation app kept glitching, telling him both ways were clear and then immediately flagging them red. He'd heard my broadcast the night before about avoiding the main routes, and he asked, "Which way should I go?" I looked at the map still open on my laptop and saw the stadium flashing with alert icons, saw the side road marked as unknown, no data. In that moment, my stomach turned over. I could hear his sister breathing in the background, little hiccuping breaths. I said, "Take the side road. Stay away from crowds. If you see smoke ahead, turn around." He thanked me, voice cracking, and hung up. I listened for confirmation that he made it somewhere. Some sign on another channel. Something. But I never heard his voice again. Sometimes I think I hear it outside the bunker, mixed in with the scratching and the low moans they make when they're restless. Guilt is a kind of echo that never fades. Right now, the scratching on the far door has been off and on for hours. Earlier, it was light, like nails or broken fingers dragging across metal. Then it stopped. That's worse. You want them to keep making noise so you know where they are. The quiet means they're moving around the back or lying still, listening. That's why Rule 1 is never trust silence. If you're in an apartment, don't trust a silent hallway. If you're hiding in a shop, don't trust that you can't hear anything outside. Sound lies. Or maybe it's that silence lies and sound tells the truth. Up there, on the street above this station, the street that used to have a tram stop and a kebab stand that stayed open past midnight, there are cars with doors still hanging open, lights long dead, and something that used to be human sometimes drags its feet along the curb. I can feel it in the floor, the faint vibration, like a washing machine in another room. They don't talk, not like us. The only time their mouths open is when they've found something warm to bite into. I try not to picture it. Sometimes I fail. I keep thinking about Anna and Daniel, my wife and my brother. They disappeared in different directions. but the ache they left sits in the same spot in my chest. When the first serious evacuation orders came down, not the sugar-coated ones, but the real trembling-voiced ones from local officials who'd lost their polish. We argued in our kitchen until my throat hurt. Anna wanted to go. She believed there had to be somewhere safer, somewhere with fences and spotlights and food that wasn't scavenged from vending machines. Daniel thought the opposite. He had this stubborn faith in the city, said hiding in place, staying off the grid, would give you a better chance than joining a crowd and becoming a statistic. I stood between them, torn, holding an emergency backpack with not nearly enough in it. In the end, they both left without me. Anna followed an unofficial convoy toward the border, friends of friends promising space in their car. Daniel went the other way with a small group from our building, heading for an industrial area where he knew of storage units and side entrances. I stayed to keep the station running because I thought communication mattered, like an idiot who still believed the right information at the right time could fix things. I watched them walk away through the lobby, arms full of bags, and I told myself I'd catch up. Next day. Next week. After my shift. The trains never ran again. Every night I replay that choice and wonder which direction I should have taken, and whether either of them made it past the first week. Memory hurts more than hunger. Hunger just sits in your belly and growls. Memory gnaws at the soft parts of your mind. Sometimes, when the scratching stops and I hear footsteps above instead, heavy or light, I switch my voice to a whisper without even thinking about it. Like now. I don't know who's walking up there. Could be them, the infected ones. Could be scavengers like me, passing through and listening for signs of life they can steal. Once, not long ago, I heard careful steps, too careful, moving over the cracked tiles of the old lobby overhead. No dragging, no stumbling. Someone who still had their mind, or most of it, walking slowly, pausing every few seconds. I held my breath and reached for the power switch, ready to kill the transmitter and plunge this room into darkness. Then the steps moved toward the outer door, and I heard a soft knock, polite and hopeful. A human knock. My heart hammered so hard I thought they could hear it through the concrete. But my rule list kicked in, and I stayed silent. If they were real and decent, they'd try again later. If they were desperate or cruel, they'd try the lock. Or maybe it was nobody, and I'm losing the line between outside sounds and the noise in my own skull. I waited a long time before breathing normally. That's another thing about fear. It teaches you to be very quiet and very still for very long periods of time. Before all this, I used to read little science articles between songs. Stuff about solar flares, virus mutations, tipping points. Most of it felt like trivia. Now those fragments feel like puzzle pieces that almost make a picture. There were theories floating around even before the infection went open, and obvious. Something about experimental treatments. Something about an old pathogen thawed from ice. Something about a military project nobody wanted to name. I remember a guest who came onto the station months before everything collapsed, a virologist from the university. She talked about how viruses adapt, how they're not alive in the way we are, but they behave like ambitious ideas, finding loopholes, rewriting rules. The clip never aired because it was too dry, not catchy enough for late-night listeners. But I remember her voice when she said, "The most dangerous thing is not a highly lethal pathogen. It's one that learns how to sit quietly in the background, to spread without being noticed." I think about that a lot now, watching how they move out there, how they learned not to howl and rush all the time, but to wait, to stalk. At first, we called them monsters. Now I see them as something else. Something that's been fine-tuning itself on our mistakes. The first wave was messy, noisy, obvious. People turning in crowded wards, biting at anyone who came close, chaos spilling into streets. That we understood. Panic, we understood. It was the second and third waves that broke us. That's when infrastructure really started to crumble. Power plants shut down, some automatically, some because there was nobody left to manage them. The grid became a patchwork of random islands of light in a sea of dark. Hospitals became tombs. You'd drive past at night and see windows glowing, but the light was from fires on upper floors, not from working wards. Food chains snapped like brittle twigs. The big trucks that brought everything into the cities just stopped coming. Shelves emptied out in days. People grabbed whatever was left. Canned soup, toothpaste, bags of flour they didn't know how to turn into anything edible. I remember the first time I walked into a supermarket after the main rush. The place looked like a war zone. Shelves overturned, shattered glass, sticky puddles of spilled juice and wine. Shopping carts abandoned in the aisles with baby clothes hanging off the sides. I found a few tins of beans kicked under a display and felt like I'd discovered buried treasure. That's when I started writing my rules down. Rule 2. Don't waste calories on things you can't carry. It sounds stupid when you say it out loud, but when you're staring at a row of heavy glass jars, your stomach twisting, it helps to have something simple to fall back on. Rule 3. Never stay in a place just because it used to feel safe. Nostalgia will get you killed. People kept going back to their old offices, their favorite bars, waiting for the lights to come back on. They'd sit on familiar chairs and pretend the flickering shadows were temporary. Those places became traps. Infection loves routine. It knows where you used to be. Rule 4. Listen twice. Move once. Don't bolt just because you hear something. Don't walk just because you don't. Stop. Count to 10. Listen again. The world is quieter now, but it's not empty. There are people like you out there trying not to be seen. There are also things that used to be people. I think one of the worst nights was the first truly blackout cold night. No power, no glow from distant windows, no hum from the tram lines. Just thick darkness and breath that turned to mist in front of my face. I had holed up in the apartment with a couple of candles and a camping stove Anna had insisted we keep on a balcony storage shelf, just in case. I made a kind of soup from tinned vegetables and old pasta, and sat on the floor with a blanket around my shoulders, listening to the radio hiss and murmur between stations. Most of what I got was static. Occasionally a panicked voice from another city, another country, talking too fast in another language and then cutting out mid-sentence. Once I heard a man praying, not even broadcasting, just somehow picked up by an open mic. It made me feel less alone and more alone at the same time. That's when I realized old things were going to save us if anything did. The modern stuff went first. The glossy, sealed, smart devices, the things with updates, the dumb, mechanical objects kept working. Wind-up lights, bicycles, hand-crank radios. I started collecting them. That became Rule 5. If it doesn't need a chip, keep it. Down here in the bunker, I have an old bike with no tires left, just rims. I set it up on a stand and rigged a dynamo to it for a while, pedaling to charge up a little battery. It was exhausting, but there was something comforting about feeling my own legs power the small strip of light over the desk, or the short burst of transmission like this one. Before the infection, you'd never think twice about power. Flip a switch, plug something in, and there it was. Infinite. invisible. Now every watt feels like a gulp of water in a desert. People out there, I saw it in the first weeks, started using everything they had forgotten. Old kerosene stoves from grandparents' attics, tools with wooden handles, cracked manuals for repairing things we would have thrown away before. There was this old man I saw one evening, near the edge of the river, working on a generator with a little crowd around him. He had a box of mismatched bolts, some grease, and a headlamp held together with tape. Kids watched him like he was doing magic. When it sputtered to life and a single string of bulbs lit up over their camp, people clapped and laughed in this desperate, relieved way that made me want to cry. In that moment, the infection, the chaos, all of it, took a back seat to the simple miracle of light. There are still signs of life if you know where to look. That's what keeps me talking. Last week, or what I think was last week, I slipped out at dusk and climbed the narrow stair to the ground floor to peer through a crack in the boarded-up entrance. The street was mostly empty, but in the distance, on the far side of the intersection, I saw a faint orange flicker in a building I knew used to be a bakery. Someone had lit candles in there, more than one. They weren't moving like a fire, more like quiet little points in a row. For a moment, I imagined a family sitting around flour-dusted tables, eating something warm, talking in low voices, keeping each other sane. Maybe it was just my brain filling the blanks, but that's the thing about this world now. Hope is cheap in your mind and expensive in reality. You can have it all you want inside your head. Out there, every glimmer costs you something to reach. I stayed where I was. I didn't go to the bakery. Instead, I came back down here and put that sight in a small, protected box in my memory. A candlelit bakery. People using a wood-fired oven because the electric ones are all cold. Human adaptation in the face of a world that doesn't care. As for them, the infected, the dead who refuse to stay dead, they've changed too. At the start, everyone described the same thing. Wild, jerky movements, teeth and claws, rushing any sound or light. But the longer this goes on, the more patterns I see. They don't wander randomly anymore. They drift in loose packs, like animals that found a shared instinct. They avoid wide open spaces in daylight. They hug walls, stick to shadows. I saw them once from the roof of the station, back when I still dared to go up there, pouring down a side street and then suddenly stopping at an intersection. They stood there swaying, heads turning as if listening to something I couldn't hear. Then, as one, they moved toward a narrow alley instead of the broad lit road. It was like watching water choose the path of least resistance, but there was purpose in it. And those barricades you sometimes find, the ones made of bodies stacked like sandbags, don't let anyone tell you they're just the aftermath of a fight. I've seen one being made. A group of them dragging corpses, some of them still twitching, toward a doorway, piling them up to block an entrance. Maybe it's just instinct, blocking off smells, or maybe something else is at work. I don't have the answers. I just have the images burned into my brain. I met a soldier early on, when the city still had pockets of order. He was sitting on the steps outside a commandeered school, helmet off, smoking a cigarette down to the filter. I was delivering some last-minute recording equipment to a makeshift command post, trying to keep the station part of whatever network was still coordinating people. He looked young but old at the same time, if that makes sense. Lines on his face that shouldn't have been there yet. He told me, in that flat, exhausted way people have when they've seen too much, that whatever this infection was, it was adapting. He said their first protocols were useless within days. Headshots, sure, but they were starting to see slower cases, people who kept their motor functions for longer, people who could still speak a little, who cried as they lunged at their loved ones. He said, "It's like it's figuring out how we respond and skipping the steps we know how to fight." I asked him what the plan was. He laughed without humor and said, "Survive until someone smarter than me thinks of something." I don't know where he is now. I remember his dog tags glinting in the failing light, and the way his hand shook when he lit another cigarette. The more tired I get, the more the edge between observation and paranoia blurs. I haven't eaten properly in 2 days. Down here, I've got some crackers left, 2 cans I'm saving for when I need them most, and a half-empty bottle of water that tastes like rust. Sleep comes in fits, full of half-dreams, where I'm back behind the glass of the studio, watching old shows play on screens that no longer exist. I know I shouldn't stay here much longer. Every rule I made says not to. I've been in this bunker too many nights in a row. They'll learn my scent, if they haven't already. They're patient when they have a reason. The door is solid, but nothing is forever. I catch myself staring at the metal around the frame, wondering which bolt will give first. My voice keeps cracking, like it is now. There's a patch in every broadcast where it happens, a little tremor that betrays how much I don't want to die here, alone, under a city that's forgotten my name. That's Rule 6, I guess. Admit you're scared. The ones who pretend they're not don't last long. Fear keeps you sharp if you let it. Panic dulls you. I'm walking that line every minute. I can't stay here, and I know it. That's why I've been packing. Little things. A pocket radio, spare batteries, the last of the painkillers, a map that's out of date in all the right ways. I plan to move during a gray hour, not full night, not full day. That's when they're least predictable, and so are we. There's a clinic not far from here, up on the hill behind the tram depot. I've been watching it from the rooftop, through a cracked pair of binoculars. It looks abandoned, but that doesn't mean it is. Clinics are strange places now. Sometimes they're nests. Sometimes they're gold mines of supplies. Sometimes they're both. I'm thinking of making that my next stop, setting up a temporary base there and running mobile transmissions. That means this might be one of the last broadcasts from this bunker. The idea of leaving the humming safety of these 4 reinforced walls makes my chest tight, but the idea of being buried in here makes it tighter. So I tell myself the same thing I told callers back when callers were still a thing. Move carefully. Assume every shadow is watching you, and never ever ignore your gut. Out there, on that first night, when I understood it was all truly gone, I saw something that still visits me in the moments before sleep. The stadium, the one they told everyone to go to for shelter, was visible from the ring road if you climbed up a certain ramp. I climbed. The floodlights were on, but dim and flickering, running off whatever generators they had left. The field was packed, not with players, but with people. Bodies. Some moving, some not. From up there, they just looked like a single mass, shifting and roiling. I could hear distant shouting, a dull roar without words. Then, like a switch had been thrown, the lights went out all at once. For a few seconds, nothing moved. Then shapes began pouring out of the main gates in all directions. People? Infected? Both? That was the moment I stopped thinking, this will be over soon, and started thinking, this is how it will be now. I stood there in the dark, my breath fogging the air, and I felt something between grief and acceptance settle into my bones. I walked home the long way, avoiding every main road, and every few minutes, I looked up at the sky, expecting to see helicopters, drones, something. There was nothing but stars. In the days that followed, those who survived started improvising in ways no survival guide had ever really prepared us for. People linked up with neighbors they'd barely nodded to before, pooling food and skills. I saw kids teaching adults how to siphon fuel from abandoned cars because they'd watched a video about it once. I saw someone building a homemade wind turbine from an old bike wheel, bits of pipe, and tattered plastic, sticking it out of a 7th-floor window. At night, corridors and apartment blocks glowed with candlelight. You'd walk past and hear pots clinking as someone tried to turn flour and water into something edible, or hear quiet singing to calm a crying child. Hospitals were the worst, though. Once they ran out of power, they turned from places you go to get healed into places you go to disappear. Stories started circulating. One about a nurse who stayed behind to keep ventilators running by hand cranking something all night. Another about a doctor who locked whole wards from the outside to stop the recently dead from getting out. Some were probably just stories, but they carried a truth deeper than facts. Nobody was coming with a neat fix. We were on our own with whatever we could build out of scraps. That's when I started keeping a mental manual in my head, and eventually writing it on the walls down here. Rule 7. If you find a place with more than 2 generators running, don't approach. That kind of power draws danger, human and otherwise. People kill for the illusion of abundance now. Rule 8. Watch chimneys. No smoke means no one's using real fire. Thin smoke that smells like plastic means someone is burning things they shouldn't, someone who is desperate or careless. Thick, steady smoke that smells like wood can mean a community that knows what it's doing. Maybe safe, maybe not, but worth noting. Rule 9. If you meet someone who says they're alone, assume they're not. There's always someone watching your interaction, waiting to see how you react. Could be a friend, could be someone with a gun. Don't show all your cards. Keep a reserve of kindness and a reserve of caution. Give a little food, never all of it. Share information like it's silver, not gold. I wish I could tell you I followed all my own rules perfectly. I didn't. I made stupid, human mistakes. Once, on a long-forgotten afternoon when the sun actually felt warm, I sat down in the middle of an empty street because my legs wouldn't carry me anymore. I leaned my back against a street lamp and closed my eyes, listening to the buzz of summer insects. For a few dangerous minutes, it felt almost normal. I let my guard down. When I opened my eyes, there was a boy standing in front of me. He couldn't have been older than 13. He wore a hoodie too big for him, and sneakers with one untied lace. His hands were empty, held slightly away from his sides, like he wanted to show he meant no harm. His eyes were too wide, too old. He asked if I had water. I gave him some, more than I should have, because his lips were cracked and his voice sounded like sand scraping. He thanked me and ran off. Later, several blocks away, I walked into an ambush in a narrow alley. 3 older teens, one with a crowbar, one with a knife, one with nothing but that same hungry look. They'd been watching. The boy had been bait. I got away only because of noise. A real solid crash from the opposite end of the alley distracted them long enough for me to bolt. I still don't know what caused that noise. Maybe one of them stepped on glass. Maybe some stray infected hit a trash can. Either way, I stumbled out with bruises and a fresh crack in my trust, and a new line in my manual. Rule 10. Every kindness has shadows attached. Shine your light, but keep one hand on the switch. There's something almost funny in a bitter way about how we used to treat fear. We turned it into entertainment. Horror movies, zombie shows, end-of-the-world podcasts. You'd sit on your couch, watch actors run from shambling corpses, and then go to bed feeling safe because it wasn't real. Now I find myself laughing at memories of those nights, not because they were funny, but because of how wrong we were about what would hurt the most. It isn't the gore, the teeth, the blood that sticks with you. It's the quiet choices. The moment you decide not to open a door. The moment you walk away from someone calling for help because you know if you stay, you die. I've had those moments. I carry them like stones in my pockets. And yet, somehow, I still find myself laughing sometimes, genuinely laughing, at stupid things my brain digs up. An old argument with Anna about who made the worst coffee. A prank Daniel pulled on me in high school. The way a colleague once accidentally played 2 jingles at once on air and tried to style it out like it was on purpose. That laughter feels wrong, but also like the only way to keep my head above water. If you're listening to this and you find yourself chuckling in the middle of a ruined supermarket because you remember a terrible advertisement jingle, let it happen. That's your brain keeping you human. I know I keep circling back to them. The ones outside, the infected. But they're the weather now, the constant condition you plan your day around. Wind, rain, dead things. You start to notice little changes. At first, they threw themselves at any barrier, smashing into doors and windows until their bones broke. Now, they conserve themselves. They test. They press lightly, then harder, then listen. They back off if something feels too strong, or they pretend to. I saw one lying in the middle of a corridor in an office building, perfectly still, arms splayed. It looked like a corpse, finally at rest. I almost stepped over it. Something made me stop. A prickle on the back of my neck, a shadow that didn't match. I stared at it for a full minute. Its chest didn't rise. Its eyes were half closed. Then, somewhere far away, a window shattered. The sound echoed down the hall. In that split second, its fingers twitched, flexing like a cat dreaming. It was listening, waiting for a stimulus worth moving for. I backed away and took the stairs instead. That's when I added another rule. Rule 11. Assume they're playing dead until you've watched them for longer than feels comfortable. The more I think about it, the more I see this whole thing as a series of signals. Some we can read, some we can't. Radio waves bouncing uselessly off empty buildings. Emergency broadcasts still looping from stations where everyone is gone. Hand-painted arrows on walls pointing toward safe zone that lead you into dead ends. People sending up flares that draw the wrong kind of attention. Governments disappeared by going silent. The last official thing I heard from any capital was a broken sentence about martial law and necessary measures before the line cut out. It wasn't dramatic. There was no final address, no cinematic speech, just a mid-syllable cutoff, and then static. After that, it was all rumors. Someone said a convoy from Berlin made it to a fortified area near the coast. Someone else swore that the French army had drawn a line along a river and was holding it. Someone claimed the British had turned an island into a safe haven, only letting in boats they vetted. Maybe some of that is true. Maybe none of it is. In a world built on instant updates, the absence of information is the loudest message of all. Now, sitting here, hunched over this microphone, feeling the slight warmth from the transmitter fan on my hands, I'm starting to wonder if these broadcasts are just me tracing shapes in fog. And yet, I cling to them, to this ritual. Power up the system, check the cables, tap the mic, say my name like it still matters. Because if someone out there, in a cellar, in a forest hut, in a half-collapsed farmhouse, is turning the dial of an old FM radio And here's another human voice that might be the difference between them giving up and trying one more day. So here I am. This is Thomas Miller, under a cracked city that used to be called Dresden, on 103.9 FM, powered by a battery older than some of the kids who didn't make it. I'm tired. I'm hungry. I'm scared. But I'm still talking. Soon I'll leave this place and make my way to that clinic. When I do, I'll bring this transmitter if I can carry it, or at least the parts that matter. I'll broadcast on the move if I have to, wiring the antenna to whatever rooftop I can rest on for 10 minutes at a time. Maybe I'll sound breathless, dodging shadows between sentences. Maybe you'll hear my boots slipping on broken glass. That's the reality now. Mobile transmission. No studio, no soundproof walls, just a man, a microphone, and a world full of teeth. On the way, I'll think about all the close calls I've already had. The time I ducked into an empty tram and lay flat between the seats, while a herd shuffled past, their feet inches from my face. The time I slipped in a pool of something I don't want to name, and my hand landed on a watch still on a wrist, and I had to bite my own tongue not to scream. The time I heard singing in the distance and followed it against my better judgment, only to find a group of survivors huddled around a barrel fire, singing quietly to keep their hands from shaking. For every danger, there's been a spark like that, a reminder that we're still here, stubborn and ridiculous, out there, between these ruined blocks and the dead highways. Rumors travel faster than anything else. Lately, I've been hearing the same one from different directions, which means there might be something to it. They say there's a fortified shipping yard far from here, maybe on the northern coast, maybe even across a border if borders still matter. A place with high fences and stacked containers turned into homes. A place where they've cleared the infection out inside the perimeter and keep watch from towers. A place where they have actual food rotations, water, maybe even medicine that didn't expire 2 years ago. Most people talk about it like a fairy tale. My cousin's friend made it there. A trader passed through who had a stamp on his hand. I've learned not to chase every whisper. But when I was scanning frequencies a few nights ago, I caught a fragment of something on a weak channel. A coded message, heavy with interference. Numbers, then a word that repeated. It sounded like the name of a port city I know, but the signal was too broken to be sure. And one of the words, I swear, sounded like the name of the company where Anna used to work. It could have been a coincidence. Brains are good at making patterns out of noise. But I've latched onto it anyway. Hope is cheap inside your head, remember? I'm not telling you to head for any shipping yard. I don't know if it exists, and if it does, it could be hell. Controlled by the worst kind of survivors, the ones who wear power like armor and treat other people like currency. Or it could be a real sanctuary. What I am telling you is this. If you hear repeated signals, the same numbers or words on different days, pay attention. It might be coordinates. It might be a schedule. It might be someone like me, trying to say, I'm still here, in a way that cuts through the static. Just don't trust it blindly. That's one of the last rules I'll leave you with tonight, before I conserve the rest of this battery. Rule 12. Never trust anyone's signal completely, not even mine. Test it, cross-check it, use your eyes and ears first. I can feel the battery sagging. The little green light has gone from steady to occasional. My voice is probably starting to break up on your end, if there is an end. Before I go for now, I want to leave you with something more than rules and fear. Humanity is stubborn. We've survived plagues and wars and winters where people ate bark off trees. We've survived empires collapsing, maps being redrawn, languages disappearing. We carry stories in our bones about getting through things much worse than this, even if this feels like the worst because it's ours. When you're sitting in the dark, listening to this, or to the wind, or to your own heartbeat, remember that. Remember that someone, somewhere, is lighting a candle. Someone is fixing a bike with whatever tools they can find. Someone is teaching a child how to filter water through sand and cloth. Someone is laughing at a joke that would have fallen flat in the old world, but now feels like a tiny victory. That's what staying human looks like now. Small, stubborn acts of normality in a landscape that has forgotten what normal even means. I'll try to be on this frequency again when the sky is the same color as old concrete, when the shadows are long but not yet deep, that half-light time, maybe what used to be called late afternoon. If the battery holds, if I'm still breathing, if I've made it to the clinic and not ended up as part of a barricade of bodies outside some door. Keep your radio tuned if you can. Keep an ear out for my voice, for any voice. And in the meantime, move carefully. Eat when you can. Drink more than you think you need. Trust your instincts more than maps. Don't stay where your heart is just because your heart hurts to leave it. And never, ever trust silence. This is Thomas Miller, still here for now, under a dead city that hasn't completely stopped breathing, on 103.9 FM. If you're out there, you're not alone, even if it feels that way. Hold on to whatever pieces of yourself you can. We may be walking through a graveyard, but as long as someone is still walking and talking, the story isn't over yet. Keep the radio on. The sky is starting to pale, that strange gray-blue that never fully becomes morning anymore. And I'm speaking into this microphone from a stairwell just below the old clinic I told you about. This is Thomas Miller. Same voice, same shaking hands, same battered radio gear. Now broadcasting on 103.9 FM, if the wires I rigged together haven't come loose. The power source is a scavenged battery from a forklift I found tipped over behind the depot, and it's already humming too loud. Like it's trying to warn me it doesn't have much life left. I don't know the time, because my watch fogged up last night and never cleared, but I can tell by the cold settling into my bones that it's still early. The wind up here cuts harder than in the bunker, carrying the smell of rust and mold and something else I don't want to name. I never thought I'd miss the bunker that much. But last night I kept looking back at those reinforced walls in my mind, imagining the faint hum of the transmitter and the steady drip of condensation from the ceiling. Now I have nothing but this cracked stairwell, a broken handrail, and the sound of something shuffling on the top floor. I know you're not here with me, but talking to you makes me feel like my shadow isn't the only company I have left. Leaving the bunker was worse than I expected. The door stuck when I first tried to push it open, probably swollen from moisture or rusted from years of neglect. I had to put my whole weight against it until it groaned and gave way. The sound echoed up the stairwell like a siren, and my heart sank because I knew that noise carried farther than I wanted it to. But once the door cracked open, there was no going back. I slipped out with the pack on my shoulders, the transmitter wrapped in cloth, and my old crowbar tucked under my arm. The air outside felt raw, biting at my face, and the street looked different than before, as if shifting shadows had rearranged themselves during the nights I spent underground. Cars had new dents. Doors swung open despite no wind blowing strong enough to move them. A distant billboard was half collapsed, forming a leaning shape like a giant broken wing. Nothing was where I left it. Or maybe memory plays tricks when hunger crawls into your head. I moved fast at first, stepping between the cars, keeping low, counting my breaths. The city had that dead stillness again, the one that isn't really still at all if you know how to listen. There were soft clicking noises from the alley beside the old bakery, a loose sign tapping against a wall in a gentle rhythm that still made my fingers tighten around the crowbar. I saw a smear on the pavement that wasn't there the last time. Dark, dried, dragged in a curve like something had been pulled across the road. I kept my eyes forward, telling myself not to invent stories out of stains. That's another lesson I never wrote down, but probably should. Belief is dangerous when you fill in the blanks with the worst thing you can imagine. Sometimes it's better to only see what's right in front of you. I made it to the tram depot without trouble, slipping between overturned benches and shattered glass, climbing over the collapsed roof of an old maintenance shed. A tram was lying on its side like some metallic animal that had fallen asleep in the wrong position and never stood up again. Its windows were blown out, wires hanging like veins. I stepped around it and froze when I heard a soft, low moan drifting down the tracks. That sound always hits the same part of my brain, an instinctive recoil, the kind you feel when you smell something rotten or hear someone whisper your name in a dark room. I ducked behind a rusted ticket machine and waited. The moan came again, closer this time, and then the shuffling drag of feet. Only one set. That was something. A lone infected is manageable if you catch it at the right angle. But I didn't want a confrontation, not while carrying half my remaining tools on my back. So I waited, and waited, long enough for my legs to ache and my fingers to go stiff around the crowbar handle. Eventually, the dragging faded, replaced by the hollow clunk of something bumping against metal. I counted slowly to 30, then again just to be sure, and moved on. The clinic's outline appeared through the broken fencing. A 3-story building with smashed windows, an overgrown courtyard, and graffiti sprayed across the front doors. Don't go in. That was a bad sign. But in this world, bad signs sometimes just mean someone panicked and didn't know what they were talking about. Or someone tried to warn others and didn't have time to explain why. I don't know which is worse. Getting inside wasn't hard. A side window had already been pried open long ago, and the frame was bent enough that I slipped through with only a scrape on my shoulder. The air inside the clinic was thick and stale, like it had been holding its breath for months. It was colder, too. The kind of cold that made my teeth chatter even when I shut my mouth. I used my flashlight sparingly, clicking it on only to scan intersections where hallways branched off into darkness. Medical posters still clung to the walls. Washing hands, early symptoms of normal illnesses that feel like fairy tales now. A few wheelchairs were toppled over, papers scattered across the floor with footprints dried into them. It didn't look like a nest, not immediately, but the quiet was too complete, too controlled. I whispered into the recorder out of habit, announcing where I was, even though I didn't plan on going live until I could set up somewhere stable. I made my way to this stairwell because it felt enclosed enough to sleep without worrying about something rushing me from behind. I barricaded the lower door with a fallen cabinet and wedged the upper door with a metal rod I found. Then I sat on the steps and ate a few crackers, listening to the wind whistle through the clinic's broken windows. It had a mournful pitch to it, like someone humming a low note. I don't think I slept more than an hour at a time. Every few minutes I woke up with that electric jolt of alarm racing through my chest. That's what happens when you haven't eaten properly and you're surrounded by the unknown. Your brain inflates every sound until it feels like a threat. At dawn, I finally decided to set up the transmitter, and here we are, my voice climbing up this staircase, reaching for whoever is still alive enough to listen. I should talk more about what happened after I left the bunker, about the things I saw on the way here. I passed a pharmacy with shattered windows. Inside, it was gutted. Shelves bare, cupboards smashed, drawers pulled out and rifled through. But on the counter, under a thick layer of dust, there was a handwritten note in red marker. Please take only what you need. Someone had tried to hold on to decency, even as the world shredded around them. Nearby, they'd left a small cardboard box of assorted supplies, half-used alcohol wipes, a few tablets and torn blister packs, a thermometer that didn't work anymore. I know it sounds strange, but that box felt like a small monument to who we used to be. I stood there longer than I should have, thinking about the person who wrote that note, wondering if they survived even a day after writing it. Then there was the man I saw limping near the corner where the post office used to be. He wasn't infected. Not yet, at least. His limp was too controlled. He wore a heavy coat tied at the waist with a strip of fabric, and he held something tightly in one hand. When he turned, I realized it was a walkie-talkie. He kept lifting it to his ear like he expected to hear a voice through the static. When he noticed me, he froze. I froze too. We were both shadows to each other. Potential danger. He didn't call out. I didn't either. After a long, silent standoff, he lifted his free hand in a slow, tentative gesture. Half greeting, half warning. I mirrored it. Then he backed into an alley and disappeared without ever saying a word. That's how communication works now. Cautious hands instead of careless voices. As for the soldier I mentioned in the last broadcast, the one who talked about the infection evolving, his words came back to me on the walk here. Every shadow felt like it was holding its breath. Every doorway seemed to be waiting. And then I saw something that made my stomach knot so tight I had to stop walking to breathe properly. A group of infected, 5 or 6 of them, were gathered around something in the middle of the street. They weren't feeding, not in the old way. They were adjusting something. It looked like debris, pieces of wood, bits of metal, old signage. They were stacking it, deliberately, creating a barrier across one of the smaller roads. Not the main one, the smaller one. The one that most people would use if they were trying to avoid crowds. I watched them for maybe 30 seconds from behind a bus shelter. They didn't speak. They didn't grunt. They moved with slow purpose. And when one of them placed the last piece of wood on top of the pile, they all turned their heads in the same direction at the same time, as if some unheard signal passed between them. I backed away before they noticed me and took another route. I didn't want to know what had triggered that synchronized movement. Maybe instinct. Maybe something worse. I know I shouldn't think too much about what they're becoming. That way madness lies. But it's hard not to notice the changes once you survive long enough. They used to stumble blindly. Now they pick paths. They used to rush everything that moved. Now they wait. They used to groan constantly. Now they hold their breath like hunters. Something is happening inside them. Something growing more coordinated. But thinking about that too long is like staring at a wound. It only deepens the pain. So I keep moving, keep whispering rules to myself, keep trusting my legs to take me somewhere that isn't immediately fatal. The clinic seemed safe at first. Too safe, which usually means danger hiding in the edges, waiting until you're comfortable to crawl out. The first floor is scattered with old medical supplies, torn curtains, dusty examination tables. There are dried footprints, some human, some not. In the hallway near the reception desk, I found a pile of clothing and personal items, keys, wallets, a shoe. Not a pair. A single shoe again. I'm starting to think the world is filled with lonely shoes. Maybe it's stupid to fixate on that, but it always hits me the same way. Someone walked out of that shoe in a hurry, and the story ended there. I picked up the key ring out of instinct, but the keys felt dead in my hand. Symbols of doors that no longer lead anywhere useful. I left them on the desk. The second floor is where the danger is, or at least where danger was. When I first climbed the stairs, I saw dark streaks on the wall. Finger marks, desperate, frantic, dragging down toward the floor. There were splash patterns, too. The kind you hope are something else, but no, aren't. A gurney was wedged diagonally against a doorway, like someone had tried to block something from pushing it open. Behind it, the corridor was dim and narrow, and the air felt wrong, too warm, too still. I didn't go that way, not yet. I'll need more rest before I decide whether to explore it or avoid it forever. While searching a side room on the ground floor, I found what looked like an old emergency kit. Most of it was empty, but there were a few items left. A half roll of bandages, a tiny scalpel, and a radio charger that might fit my transmitter if I can find a compatible cable. For a moment, I felt something close to joy. It washed over me like warm water, shocking in its intensity. I had to sit down for a minute just to breathe. That little plastic charger, cracked down one side, felt like a miracle. It's strange how hope shrinks into tiny objects now. A charger, a can of food, a working lighter. I put it into my pack with trembling hands, afraid the sound of the plastic might echo too loudly. While I sat there, listening to my own heartbeat, I heard something new. Faint tapping, not footsteps, something light, soft, rhythmic, like fingernails on a window pane. But the clinic's windows are too high for anything to tap unless it climbed or was lifted. The tapping didn't move, didn't grow louder or softer. It was steady, like someone sending a signal. I froze and counted the beats. 8 taps, a pause. 8 more taps. I didn't dare check the window. Eventually, the tapping stopped. Maybe it was a loose shutter catching the wind. Maybe not. Either way, it made me think again of that soldier's warning. It adapts, it observes, it waits. I should tell you about the message I intercepted, the coded one. Last night, before leaving the bunker, I listened to the recording again. I had saved it on the small device clipped to my belt. The interference was worse than I remembered. Crackles, fades, bursts of static. But there were numbers, a sequence that repeated, not a frequency, not coordinates I recognized, but numbers nonetheless. And then that word, the one that sounded like the port city Anna visited once for a work conference. I said it last time, but I'll say it again. Maybe I'm inventing hope out of noise. But hope is how we keep walking when logic tells us to lie down and stop breathing. So I've let that message sink its claws into me. I'm holding on to it as tight as the crowbar I carry. And here's something else. I heard the message again today. Not clearly, not fully, just the tail end of it. But enough to know it wasn't a one-time glitch. Someone out there is repeating that message at irregular intervals. Someone with enough equipment to broadcast more than once. Someone who hasn't given up. But hope isn't the only thing that drives me. Rumors have a nasty way of burrowing into your mind, even when you fight them off. For the past week, I've heard bits and pieces from survivors passing through abandoned buildings or whispering near fires. They speak quietly, almost afraid to let the words exist in the air. They say there's a woman traveling with a small group near the old Eastern Road. She's quiet, resourceful, good with maps, always scans rooftops before crossing intersections. They say she wears a blue scarf tied around her wrist. They say she looks like someone's wife, someone's sister, someone's ghost brought back by stubbornness. When I heard that detail, the blue scarf, my blood drained from my face. Anna used to wear a scarf like that, a shade of blue that reminded her of the Baltic Sea we planned to visit someday. It's too much of a coincidence. Or maybe it's exactly the kind of coincidence the world uses to keep you moving, even when you feel like your legs might crumble. Either way, the rumor dug itself into my thoughts, and it hasn't left. Now I'm sitting here with my back against a cracked wall, transmitter humming faintly, the cold seeping into my spine, and that rumor is the only warmth I have. My pack is lighter than I want it to be. My water is low. My hands shake more every hour. The signal might be breaking up for you now. I can hear the faint hiss edging into my own monitor. The battery is fading. But before this part of the broadcast ends, I want to give you what I promised, the final rules I've learned the hard way. Not in list form, not carefully crafted like a survival guide, but spoken simply, the way I talk to myself when I'm choosing whether to stay or go. If you're scared, admit it. Fear sharpens your senses. If you pretend it isn't there, it blinds you. If you find a place that feels comfortable, leave before you fall asleep too deeply. Safety goes stale. If someone calls for help but you can't see them, wait. Distance hides traps, human and otherwise. If you hear tapping that repeats with unnatural rhythm, don't approach until you know the wind is blowing. If you see bodies stacked intentionally, go the opposite direction. Always. If hope shows up in a whisper, take it, but keep one hand on your weapon. And above all, never trust silence. Silence is where fear grows teeth. I think this clinic won't hold much longer. Something upstairs has been moving slowly for the past 10 minutes. Not pacing, not dragging, just shifting weight, like it's listening for me. When the battery dies, I'll pack everything again and head north. I don't know if the shipping yard is real. I don't know if the message is for me. I don't know if the woman with the blue scarf exists outside of someone's desperate imagination. But I'm going anyway. Because standing still is the same as giving up, and I'm not ready to be another lone shoe in the street. If you're out there, anywhere, keep moving, keep breathing. Keep your light low and your hope cautious. I'll try to broadcast again when I reach higher ground, or a place with a roof that doesn't feel ready to collapse. Until then, hold on to whatever pieces of yourself the world hasn't taken. Stay human, stay alert, and keep the radio on. This is Thomas Miller, still walking, still searching, still speaking into the fading dark. 103.9 FM, signing off for now.